Good morning, guys. We're still waiting for a few people to dial in. There's a lot of attendees today, so bear with us. Our mentor, Steve, will try to answer as many questions as possible within this 1 hour session. Okay. All right, guys. Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Amazing Design People List first ever coffee hours. I'm Wendy, your community lead at ADP List, and I'll be your host today. So our coffee hours is an online Q&A gathering session that will be held fortnightly, where you get to ask questions with the design mentor of the day. So if you're not following us on LinkedIn, please do. That way you get updates on what's happening in the next few weeks as we continue to line up new programs, as well as update you with more information about the website at ADP List. Okay, help us to like and share, spread the ADP List around just so that we can extend our help to more designers to use our platform. Right, I see people are slowly streaming in. All right, just give you guys a little context of how ADP lists have come up in the last 6 to 7 weeks. The mentors and the entire team behind ADP list has been working around the clock relentlessly trying to put together as many resources as we can to help those who lost their jobs during COVID-19. And currently, there are about like 200 over mentors and 3,000 over designers on the platform. So I really would urge you guys to at least have a call to action after every session like this, or your one-to-one portfolio reviews with your mentors. Let us know how it benefited you in any ways. Before I jump into introducing your first mentor, I'd like to mention some guidelines. So for ADP List Coffee Hours, it's open and inclusive. So do us a favor, just sharing your screenshots in this session and share it on LinkedIn. So during AMA session later on, please help yourself to go to participant button, the tab, to raise your hands if you want to ask questions, because Steve will try his best to answer as many questions as possible, but just be patient with us because there's so many of you online with us today. Also, there's this chat option for you to type in your questions or any other resources that you want to share, so help yourself. Besides all that, I think we will also be recording this session. We will put it online on our website so that those who didn't get a chance to turn up today would be able to watch the replay. Okay, so without further ado, let me introduce our first of our amazing mentors, Stephen Gates. Stephen, thanks for joining us. We're so glad to have you. Stephen has been such a great help at ADP List, and he has also been spreading the word to many designers over at his own podcast called The Crazy One. So Stephen is also the Chief Design Evangelist at Invision. He has also worked with as a strategic partner with world best organization, the likes of like Facebook, Apple, Google, WeWork, and many others. I think this is a really good prime example of getting to meet great mentors outside of your circle by joining us at ADP List. I mean, I would never ever thought that I'll have this opportunity to work with you guys, a bunch of designers, and also so many amazing mentors on our platform. So it's really a pleasure to have Steve to kickstart our very first coffee hours. Let me just pass the floor over to Steve already. Thank you, guys.
Okay. Hi. Nice to see a bunch of familiar faces and see people who I know have been sort of part of conversations in the past. Yeah, I would. For me, that's why I said there's not an agenda. There's not a structure. There's not, which I know is always a great opportunity and completely terrifies some people. So what I would say is the best way to do it is to just what Wendy said, like if you've got a question or something like that, just hit that little participant thing. So you get the little hand up in the corner and I'll just sort of work through them as I sort of see them come in. And we'll just sort of take it in that order. But I think also look, there's the chat and a bunch of other things too. Again, I know not everybody loves being on camera. So again, if there's something you have in there, feel free to throw it into there. Knowing we've got about 50 minutes together, we'll definitely try to get through as many as we can. But we always come to the most interesting and most terrifying part of this, which is always who wants to ask the first question? Oh, everybody's Everybody's either searching for the button or waiting for somebody else to go first. Oh, come on. You guys didn't all show up because everything was like perfect and great and we don't have any questions and it's all awesome. Like, so again, I'm sure everybody showed up here for something that they wanted to think about or ask about. Oh, okay. Jack, let me see. I don't know. Yeah, so can we unmute Jack? See, this is the joy of Zoom and technology is doing. Yeah, I think we got to get that setting different next time so that everybody can. Yeah, I was gonna say Monday. Maybe if you just want to unmute everybody, just so we don't have to sort of unmute people one at a time, and then everybody can individually put themselves back on mute. Like as a speaker, this is the dream, is where you just have an audience that's just going to stare at you and nobody can talk to you. Like this is really what you're hoping for. Like most of the time, this is when you wake up screaming. Yeah, we're a captive audience. Literally, you are a captive audience. This is like everybody's dream. Is it's just like, I'm just going to sit here and talk to you. That's okay. I can riff. I can do a little interpretive dance. We can figure out, how to do something. I mean, that's the good news is, especially doing it this way. I've had my laptop crash. I've had all sorts of different stuff. I don't know, Jack, in the short term, you maybe just want to throw it in the chat until we can kind of get everybody unmuted, just so we can kind of pivot and try and figure out the best way to kind of get that to work. Oh, explain the Mr. Incredible.
Hey, so sorry. Just trying to get everyone unmuted. Bear with me.
Yeah, no worries. So while Jack's typing, yeah. So this is what happens when you don't have kids and you're like basically a large adult. So my background is actually in computer animation.
All right, I just allowed everyone to unmute yourself. Jack, can you try it?
Yeah, I'll sort it there now.
Steven, I think you're muted, Steven. Yeah, you should unmute yourself.
Sorry, I was gonna say she muted everybody else and muted me. So yeah, no, the Mr. Incredible is actually. I used to work in 3D animation. I actually worked at Pixar for a little bit, so it's actually a maquette from The Incredibles. And like, yeah, this is what happens when you don't have kids and a little too much free time. Is that your entire office looks into like the kid who never grew up. But Jack, such anticipation waiting for this question. We're sure it's going to be spectacular. No pressure after the delay.
Cool. So I'm just going to leave now then, yeah?
Yeah, I mean that's cool. I mean, you've made the impact. It'd probably be good just to, but no, let's just humor everybody and ask it anyway.
I was on a call last week that you were talking on with the Nigerian Design Council, and one of the things that you made a point about was the recent kind of like surge of Zoom calls and how the typical or average person speaking on them was an older white male.
Yep.
And how one of the projects that I've started getting involved with is kind of trying to bridge that gender gap in design. Do you have any recommendations on how to push this imbalance in the design community going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things. So I think there's a racial imbalance. I think there's a gender imbalance. I think that there's a lot of those sort of things. I think one is just, and I know a couple people had already put it in the chat, right? I think to go out and to find those sort of people and to try to promote them to be able to get, because like, I've done that where for a number of events, if they want me as the keynote, they only will get it if I can pick like 5 to 10 other speakers who are usually women and minorities and different things like that, so that I'm able to actually force the events into shifting, because it's just like you look at the lineup and it's too many people who look like me. I think it's good to be able to sort of coach and raise awareness. I mean, that's a lot of the talking that I do and a lot of coaching is that, if you look at it, like, part of the reason there's a gender imbalance is because one, there's just a lot of bias and that people like to hire people who look like them and think like them. I think that there's some part of it where you'll also see if you look at like psychological trends of, 90% of men will apply for a job they aren't quite qualified for. Only 50% of women will do it. So again, I think trying to empower and coach on those sort of things. But I think a lot of it for me is just to be able to help create those opportunities, that if you've got the influence and the opportunity, like I said, to be able to sort of open that up to try to educate as many people as you can. like I said, in my position, I'll do it by force. But I think a lot of it is also just how do we create spaces for those conversations? Because again, I think there's a lot of the challenge is that bias can be done with good intent and with bad intent. I think I've certainly been guilty of doing, sort of gender and racial bias issues with good intent. I would do that sort of thing where I would want to rush in and save everybody and do those sort of things. And it's not the good behavior to be able to have. So I think that ability to educate people, that ability to try to be an advocate around it, to be able to raise this in these sort of forums about why this sort of thing is important, that, whenever it's not, why aren't you because we're listening? But again, how do we create those opportunities to do that sponsorship, to raise people up, to be able to do that? Because I think that's the only way, is to sort of try to help model and push that behavior. I think the challenge, though, is there's not going to be one answer. There's not going to be an easy answer to be able to do that. But again, I think even for me, I've noticed, how even just saying it starts conversations, how at least saying it, admitting it, how admitting that, again, I recognize that I am part of the problem and I'm not okay with that, goes a really long way. And that, I think the more you're able to try to say that sort of stuff, it really helps. But like I said, to be able to get into looking at hiring practices, to be able to look into, again, what are the speakers that you're doing? There's two amazing women who I actually mentor who have something called Project Inkblot. And they're sort of trying to put together methodology around how do we deal with, and I think for them, we've even sort of rebranded it. We don't call it diversity and inclusion. We call it cultural bias, which is that, again, there are cultural defaults. There are these sort of things that we've all just sort of become accustomed to being normal. And so again, I think the more we can call those out and rewire them, the better it is. But yeah, I think that just, that sort of raising your hand and saying, look, because I think that was my problem. It's look, as a white male executive, I feel like if I even said those words, I'm somehow going to get sued, or I'm going to admit to something that somehow I did something bad by just existing that way. And for me, it's just I felt like I'm just sort of enabling the problem, as opposed to, again, trying to sort of help at least start a conversation or to try to help create opportunity. But again, I'd also love, like I said, I also feel like I'm somewhat the wrong person to render an opinion. So I think if there are also other people who have found successful ways of doing that, I'd love to be able to hear.
So Laura Hogan has an article, and I dropped it in the chat, about what sponsorship looks like. And it's sponsorship over promotion. And it's the idea between the two is that sponsorship, you're not really saying, hey, I'm going to help you do this thing or help you reach this goal in a mentorship way. It's more of, hey, I need this person to do this X thing. And it's okay, cool. Well, I've got this person right here, and I'm actively sponsoring this person for growth and for these opportunities, over saying, oh, I'm going to mentor you and help you get better, kind of thing.
Yeah.
I found that has worked for me, especially when it comes to junior designers. Junior designers are always hungry for, hey, I want to work on this project or this project. The ones that I've come across, it's okay, cool, I can help you, I'll just sponsor you. I won't actually say anything about it, I'll just do it. And that article has information in there about how to do it effectively.
Yeah, cheers, guys.
They're doing some great work around that. Like I said, I think even, again, I'd be happy to have them do one of these or ask them to do that. Again, there's a lot of events that I have them trying to do, but that's what I said, is I think the more we can also just sort of pull the taboo out of even sort of saying the words, hopefully we can start to be able to make some progress.
Yeah, thank you. I'll stick myself back on mute there now.
Sure. That was a high bar for the first question.
I had a question around, right now I've just kind of been exploring different methodologies for one-on-ones, and I was wondering if you had a preferred method that you like using.
For me, it's sort of the tried and true one. I always sort of like, some variant of a start, stop, continue, just because I think, a lot of one-on-ones, and I think especially whenever they become remote, that ability to just be how you doing? Great. Or it's look, how do we get into okay, what am I doing that's working? What am I doing that's not working? Again, to get specific feedback. And so I think a structure that forces specific feedback, because again, everybody has an opinion. It's just in many cases, they don't tend to be aired in the right forums. And then again, I think that ability to sort of then return that structure. So it's also kind of a two-way conversation, because I think I always really like it when we're sort of able to sort of do it, coach each other or help with that way. So it's not just, okay, look, here's a list of everything you did wrong. Here's what I need you to do. And it's just great, go away. But again, if we're being able to sort of do that, because then I think that there tends to be just a sense of intimacy you get out of that one-on-one, I think sort of works fairly well. But again, I think there are a few different variants of that. And like I said, I think it's also just making sure that you are, really going in and trying to not only deal with the work side of it, but either the creative process side, the personal side, because again, that's sort of a result of a lot of those sort of things. So again, I think the more you can have that conversation. And the other trick that I kind of learned the hard way is also, just be measured in when you're doing your one-on-ones of how many takeaways are you taking away. Because if the takeaway from every one-on-one is there's something you're going to go fix, you're going to burn out and you're going to be incredibly ineffective. So I think also making sure that, because in some of coaching, it's saying, okay, look, this is what I want you to do. We're growing you. But again, recognizing there are some fights that I need to go fight. But I think also just sort of being thoughtful about that, because I see a lot of leaders burn themselves out because they've got 3 takeaways from every one-on-one. And then all of a sudden the team just doesn't sort of believe that they're going to be effective because they keep agreeing to do stuff and then not coming through.
Thank you.
Sure.
That's good stuff. I was looking at the video that you posted about the 80-10 or 10-80-10 rule. Yeah. So that was kind of my follow-up question to that. So thank you.
Yeah, and that's why I said, because I think that's why for me I try to create those percentages, because I think also if I'm dealing in opportunities and insights, which is sort of what that 80% is, because a lot of it for me is sort of being the boss I wish I had or something, where it's like, how do I respect their process? How do I challenge them? How do we do those sort of things to let them use their talent? Because the boss you never want as a creative is the one who just tells you what to do. Because it's like, yeah, maybe that's fine early in my career, but pretty quick, it's just sort of like, look, if all you want is just a bunch of minions who are going to sort of do your bidding, like, go work in an animated movie or something. Like, this isn't going to work.
Right.
Cool. I have a question.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Cool.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Thank you so much, Stephen, and thank you so much for the amazing ADP list community. It's really, really great. My question is that I love our conversation about mentorship, inclusion, and diversity. But I'm wondering, Stephen, from where you stand, you have been hiring, interviewing, managing, and leading great design teams. So I'm wondering, what makes an individual stand out across all levels of designers? So let's say when you are interviewing, for example, a mid-level or senior designer, what are the attributes you think really makes a difference? But the same question applies to maybe design managers, design lead, and junior designers.
Sure. No, it's a good question. So I think most of the time when I'm interviewing people, there are really 2 things that I'm trying to get a sense of. And I think how how much of those they have depends on the level. The 2 things I'm looking for is, one, can they think? Like, for me, the world is full of people that can make pretty pictures. It's full of people who know different apps. That's not, like, that's great, but that, and again, you may need some of those people on your team, but what I'm looking for is somebody who can think, who can solve problems, somebody who, again, wants to be a part of something, right? Who is engaged. That sort of creativity in a lot of different forms is really important. I think also because I think when I look at that, I don't get hung up on where you work. I don't get hung up on how old you are or what your experience is. I mean, I tell people all the time, like, I hate to break it to you, stupid people work at Apple and Facebook and Google, and like, just because you work, like, a lot of people sort of get like logo drunk, where it's like, oh, they work there, they must be amazing. No, they might not be, right? So I think for me, if you just, and I think that's why I've found designers who worked at little companies who really blew up and other stuff like that, because I'm just looking at the creativity. And the other thing for me is just I'm looking at their sort of like self-awareness. And do they understand their creative process? Do they understand how they present themselves? Do they understand sort of the impact on people around them? The way that I usually try to crystallize that is in most interviews, I ask 2 questions. The first one is I'll ask somebody if they can just describe to me how they have an idea. Like, again, not on a project, not on anything else. Like, can you just tell me whenever you are creative or when you're at your best, what do you do? I'm not necessarily really concerned with the steps, as I'm just simply aware, like trying to be aware of how they even thought about it. Because obviously if it's a junior position, if they've just thought about it a little, that's great, there's potential. If it's a more senior position, I want them to be able to speak about how they think about it, how they then, work with other people to respect their process. So I'm looking at that sort of creative self-awareness. And the other question, which always trips people up, is I'll ask them if they can tell me what they need to be happy. because I think in many cases, you know, you get a lot of people who will come in and they're going to look to their boss to say, well, you tell me what my career should be. You tell me what I need to be happy. It's an incredibly unrealistic thing. And again, have people even thought about what are they looking for in their career? I've had people who have come back to me 48 hours, 72 hours later, said they haven't been able to sleep because they don't know the answers to those questions. But I think that's my sort of thing is like, look, your book, you know, or whatever it was, your work got you in the seat to talk to me. So for me, like at that point, it's much more about, let's look at, you know, again, what are you going to be like on this team? How are you going to be creative? How are we going to be able to work together so I can help get the best out of you? So those tend to be the things that I focus on. But like I said, is I think that too many people either, like I said, they get company drunk or they get very into like the polish of somebody's portfolio. And like I said, it's great that you can make a pretty picture, but if you can't think, like, and that's where our real value is, that's the part of it for me where I really want to focus.
This is great. Thank you so much, Stephen.
Sure thing.
I have a question, if it's okay.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, awesome. So in terms of designing iteratively, is there a certain agile process or framework that you find most useful or one that you kind of stick to usually when you go about designing?
No. And the reason why I say that is, I mean, for me, like a process is just sort of a roadmap. And again, I think a lot of people get really, really hung up on, is it design thinking? Is it design sprint? Like if we run Agile, how do we do that? Like there are definitely a few tricks I can tell you about how to run Agile with those sort of things. But the part of it for me is like, whenever we say it's just the process, it sort of betrays the creativity and betrays what we're doing. Because again, like I will tell you, like there are two teams that I see, they have the exact same process. They have the exact same tools. They hire people from the exact same schools. One is really successful and one is a low grade dumpster fire, right? It's like, so it's not just the process unto itself. I mean, that's why I said like, I've taught design thinking for 15 years. I can give you my slides. I can give you like everything that I use. It doesn't mean that you're going to be good at facilitating it. So I think that for me, it's much more around like, what are the expectations you set around it? How do you actually make sure that it is inclusive? How do you keep people open to the possibility of not doing that, what everybody wants to do, where they try to run to a solution, right?
Yeah.
And so again, I think that for me, we tend to get very, very hung up on that process and thinking that's the only dimension. And like, again, I'm not trying to diminish and say that it's not, but I think as you look at the teamwork, as you look at the like a lot of those sort of things where it's the same way everybody gets like hung up on office space. Like I've seen some of the best work come out of the worst office space and some of the worst work come out of the best. Like it's just a way of working. So I think, you know, if you're doing those sort of things, then that works really well. Now, Agile is a very particular challenge because Agile is a software development methodology that in my experience is good at iterating on something that exists, but often struggles to create something new. And so in many cases, I think that ability to put in a design sprint or a sprint zero or something at the front of it, because creative often really struggles in Agile because, you know, whenever you're in a sprint, it tends to be about heads down execution. Rarely is there time to do ideation. So again, I think that ability of saying, okay, look, and also most companies don't really run true Agile. Like if you're on a release schedule, if your executives want approval, you're not actually running Agile. So again, most of the time it's like fragile fall or fragile or like, you know, again, some other version of it. But I think that's a lot of it for me is like, you know, and again, that's why I've done like, you know, what are the 7 rules for running a brainstorm or those sort of things. So it's like the rituals you put around it, because that's why you see so many companies, they're like, oh, we need to change the length of our design sprint, like, or our Agile sprint, like from 1 week to 2 weeks. You can make it 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months, 2 years. You're still gonna have the same problem because your process is wrong. So again, I think that ability of just sort of understanding, it gives you a framework, but it is not going to give you all the answers is usually my kind of approach to it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
I have a question.
Yeah. Go ahead, Zoe. Shawn, we'll get to you next. Zoe, let's do you, and then Shawn will do you next.
Okay, cool. Thank you, Stephen. So I'm still a design student. I'm so curious about your opinion about the free internship, especially at this special point, because I was looking for internships before the crisis happened. But right now, a lot of the companies, they just freeze hiring either for internship or like contract or anything. But there are still a couple of startup companies looking for students to like practicing the UX for them. But actually I talked to field of the companies, I realize they do not really emphasize on the UX, even though they have an idea about that. They want to do that, but it usually ended up like doing UI or something
Right.
not related to UX. So do you have any suggestions for like more junior people, how to practice those cases, or like how to find the best project at this time if they cannot find a like actual internship?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. So I think welcome to the first lesson of working in this industry, that titles are meaningless and most companies don't know what they're talking about. Because I think that's the thing that I definitely see is like what one company calls UI is another one calls UX is another one. That, again, it's always a mess. So yeah, I think that definitely is a challenge. I think right now, to me, I have never believed or encouraged people to do free internships. Just because I tend to think, most of the time they treat you like a free resource.
Yeah.
They don't invest in you. They tend to just they just want free work, right? And for me, I don't want to work for a company that does that, because yes, it gives me something I can probably put on my resume, but it gives me no real experience. It's not really gonna, if anything, it's just probably gonna start to make you a little bitter a little too soon about like, again, why am we're not investing in this? Again, I think, for me, internships, because I think that's such a hard moment, because all the time I will rail on companies about their job descriptions, because I will never understand why in the universe every junior job description in the universe wants 3 to 5 years experience. Like where the hell is 0 to 3, right? Like that never makes any sense. So again, I think there are some tricks that I know to do, right? I think one is, a big one that I'm a fan of is like find the companies or the teams that you really would love to be a part of. I can't tell you how many people I coach for free, how many interns I brought on, how many people I found an opportunity for, who just wrote me a truly like impassioned letter saying that they wanted to be a part of the team and here's why. Again, I think, but impassioned and honest is the key word, because I get so many people who reach out to me and they just want to have coffee because they said they want to do it. Like they aren't really sincere, and you can easily tell the difference between the two. But I think one is a part of it is to take a little bit of control of your career and try to start to do outreach. I think that can help. I think you can look at nonprofits. You can look at sort of other places. I think, again, like ADP list or things like that, the ability to say, hey, look, I'm just an intern, to be able to try to find that. Again, I think those can be really good things. I'm also just, for me, and again, I know that whenever you're starting out, you can sort of be really insecure about it. I think it's also, for me, like, don't let the fact you're still in school sort of like limit your thinking. Because to me, like, I always will sort of joke, it's not about the years, it's the mileage. I know some really, really young people who have some amazing insight and amazing experience. And I know some people who've been in this industry for 40 years and couldn't fall off a boat and hit water. Like, just because you've done it for a long time doesn't mean you know what the hell it is you're doing. But again, I think, that ability to find projects, find something you want to redesign. Last year, there was somebody who was in your experience, your place, who was like, look, they really wanted to go work at Apple. And I'm like, great. And he put together sort of a redesign of iTunes, and within 3 weeks got hired by Apple. So again, I think if it's also sort of like, this is who you are, or this is where you want to go, I know that it can feel like maybe you're going to miss out on things, or that maybe you're going to, again, try to miss on some of those things, because if you're not appealing to everybody. But I think if you can say, hey, look, either these are the companies, these are the industries, these are those things, then it even helps you focus on, help them sort of find you. I think there's also, again, a ton of people have been putting links into the chat, which I think is also great as well. But that's what I said, is I think the more you can try to do that sort of outreach, and like I said, it's just, I know whenever you're in school, but again, I know people who never even went to school, who again are able to do that. And I think that's why I said, it's also just, don't be intimidated by those job descriptions, because I think I said this on another one of my office hours. Like recently I had a recruiter reach out to me, and it was for like some mid-sized bank. And she said, well, you have to have a bachelor's degree and 15 years of experience in banking. And it was a job I guarantee you I was probably overqualified for. And I said, that's great. I said, just FYI, I have neither of those things. And I checked, because I know the head of design at every major bank, and no head of design at any major bank has that either. So maybe you need to revise your job description. So again, I think that ability to sort of like, to be able to try to step up and try some of those things, like I said, will sort of hopefully get you over that hump, because that's what I said. I have no idea what the hell they think happens between like graduation and 3 years, but I think that you are in a moment where the ability to get remote work and do those things is higher than ever. So hopefully that will also help.
Okay.
But also if
Thank
you
you
keep
very
struggling
much.
or stuff like that, again, anybody, you can feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to connect you to companies, or if I know of people who are looking for interns or things like that, like I'm happy to share it out to the list of whoever I know that does those sort of things. Like, again, I'm happy to help use my network for that stuff. Felix,
That's
you want to
great,
chip in
great.
on that? I know Felix has been furiously typing in the chat.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the ways that if you want to really break into UX, like what Steven say, don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. If you think you know UX, in the first place, just feel free to challenge the status quo. Tell them what you believe, and I think more than often not, great companies, they admire people like that. They want people who can stand up and fight for something. Because at the end of the day, you're going to be speaking for your users, right? So that's super important. And just a note, right? Feel free to reach out to me as well. I'm happy to open my network. My network is mostly in Southeast Asia, so I'll be happy to do any referrals if anyone need in Southeast Asia. Yeah.
Great.
And again, I'll give Felix and James all the credit in the world, because again, I think if you look at these two guys, who one is in Singapore and again one is in Ghana, like if you look at sort of where they are and how old they are, like again, most people are not going to say, oh, they're the ones who sort of did this. But again, I didn't know these two guys 6 weeks ago. I'm very much riding on their coattails, trying to support this. So I think, that ability to kind of say, look, we just want to create this thing and to be able to invest in it, and then you see what it turns into. I think hopefully you can kind of see the possibility in that.
Definitely.
Yeah. And I think, just to drop in one note is that, even we know that the community is about reaching out to mentors and then getting yourself seen by recruiters on a platform. But I think one of the newest thing that we are seeing is that designers are actually reaching out to fellow designers, be it interacting or be collaborating, asking for opportunities. You can search for people within your same location. I think that has been a new thing that me and James we have been seeing together with the team. And I think that has been really incredibly inspiring, because the community has been coming together, not just mentors and designers, but designers to designers right now as well. So this is something that you can try out, if you want to speak to someone around in the same junior level as well, just to get their thoughts on what they're facing as well.
Yeah.
Sounds great. Sounds amazing. Thank you. Thank you guys so much. Yeah.
Shawn, you were up next.
Alrighty. Okay, so I was watching your 2016 talk, Generate New York, and towards the end, you had expressed some concern about the vacuum of leadership that you sort of perceived. And I was curious, this is sort of a two-part question. Number one, after releasing the design maturity model, how do you feel about that state of leadership now? And then the second part of that question is, if you were currently a mid-level designer that's working at a level 2 or 3 company, what questions are not being asked that should be?
A very good question. So for those who don't know, there was something that Invision that I was a part of. It was led by a woman named Leah Bewley, who did it. It was really sort of like the world's biggest, most comprehensive look at sort of the impact of design and creativity on the design industry. We talked to 2,200 different companies in 74 different countries and 22 different industries to really just sort of understand what's going on. And yeah, so in my previous talks, I think for me, I'm a big believer the world is full of a lot of managers and very few leaders. Because again, I think there's a lot of people who will just tend to hit deadlines, who will just tend to sort of shepherd projects from one point to another. And again, I think this is why there's a huge amount of imposter syndrome or frustration and creativity. I mean, Shawn, I think the interesting part for me was I think that the study for me just validated that fear. Because if you look at the data of the 2,200 different companies, what you're going to see is that 83% of the world's companies are in the middle to the bottom of design maturity. So it's a 5-tier level, right? So what you'll see is that 83% are a 1 to a 3. And I think that for me just is sort of indicative of, one, as designers, the evolution that we need to undertake to understand business more, to be able to get more of the seat at the leadership table, which again, I think, historically we've struggled with, to be seen less about being execution and more about creativity, and to do some of those things. And I think, the challenges and where you'll see those companies that are sort of in that 2 to 3, sort of the middle of the model, they really usually get stuck on the bridge from level 3 to level 4, because the first 3 levels are really about the design team. How do you get design operations? How do you get basic things in place? How do you define how are you successful? How do you, there's a lot of just where you can look internally to create change. As you get into 4 and 5, it's about creating organizational change. So it's
Right.
that now I need my partners to buy in. Now I need other parts of my company to evolve as well. And that most of the time that evolution is where they get stuck, because it's like, well, look, we can control us, but if engineering, product, marketing, executives still want to work in old ways or doing things like that, and we don't want to sort of invest in all sort of coming together, that's where they get stuck. I mean, the advice that I would have for those sort of companies is, in many cases, you know, whenever I'll talk about, you know, investing in like a methodology. So how do you bring people together to be a part of the process? Again, I'm a big believer that like everybody should own the idea and the outcome. Just individual teams own your kind of individual artifacts. So that again, design or, you know, engineering can own different parts of it. I think those are definitely an important part of it. I think if you can get to shared goals, because most of the time we short circuit that by each team, you know, so engineering, marketing, design, product, like we all have our individual goals and our individual roadmaps and what it is we're doing. And there's very little shared accountability. I started to get organizational impact when we all were held to the same thing. So no longer could design say it was engineering's fault. No longer could engineering say it was product's fault. No longer could product say it was everybody else's fault. You would succeed or fail together. Again, basic teamwork that you think would be obvious, but yet here we are. I think the ability to do that, but for me, there's always just been that basic psychology of just working on like people will support what they're a part of. So if I bring in legal, I brought in regulators, I brought in other teams and tried to just say, look, this isn't about me being right? This is about how do we work on this together? How do we test all of our ideas? How do we, and because in a lot of cases, they're going to be super hesitant. Because we tend to be the only team that's sort of comfortable being uncomfortable, or we'll jump off the cliff and build our wings on the way down. Everybody else is like super used to like, I am here and this is what the goal is, and I see that as a straight line. And so again, I think more of that ability to say, hey, look, let's change the way we think. Let's do this sort of thing. This isn't about me trying to take ownership, because I think that's the other thing that short circuits is like the internal politics on that stuff is bullshit, and it kills so much creativity.
Well, absolutely. And that's where that second part of the question came from, is being in those organizations that are in that level where design teams are a little more mature, but you're still trying to get the buy-in from other companies, or excuse me, from other departments and other teams, and doing some research on how to maybe go about that. One thing that I saw was like there's sort of a pattern in the advice that's given. So that's why I was curious, what isn't being asked, you know?
I mean, the two things that I've found to be able to break through some of that stuff is that, one, go work with the people who want to work with you, right? Because again, I think like there are those sort of things where there are naturally going to be some people who are like, look, I'll give it a try or do whatever it is. And the other trick that I do is go work on something nobody cares about. Like, again, the way that I got design thinking to break through at Citibank was that, you know, and to scale it to the whole company was I went and I trained my team. I could control them. And then I was like, what is like the weirdest, most obscure other team that I could teach? And I found this group called Treasury and Transfer Services, a group that was not fun at parties, right? And I went and taught them, because what I was able to show was, oh, hey, I trained my team, and then I trained this other team over there, and I took a CEO like on a tour of that sort of space. Because if I went and tried to train our mainline product team, or if I went and tried to train our mainline engineering team, there is so much resistance there. There is so much red tape there. There's so much like where they feel like you're threatening what they've invested, that ability to go someplace where it's like, no, there's not all that red tape. They would actually love the attention. I can show that's successful, is to sort of use like organizational jealousy to be able to say, hey, look, this really works and here are the results. And hey, maybe can we just try it here? So again, I think that ability to sort of do like that organizational, like jujitsu sort of a thing, goes a really long way too, because I think most of the time that's what I see is people go to try to take on what is the biggest, the most profit making, the most attention, and the biggest team. And then they're like shocked that they can't change it because it's just it's too big and too much.
Absolutely. That's fantastic. Thank you for that, Stephen.
Sure.
Can I have the next question, please?
Sure.
Can I throw in an addendum really quick to that?
Yeah, have at it, Ellis, and then we'll get to you.
Yeah, sorry. I it's only because it's timely. What I found is Leah Bewley's work, and Stephen, you and I have talked about this before, where you look at it as companies. If you switch your mindset and look at it as design levels, so as a level 4 designer, I'm doing A/B testing. I'm doing, I'm affecting revenue, so on and so forth. What it does is it kind of gives you a roadmap for how you mature in your design career. as well as you should be, yeah, see, I had that exact same reaction. It's like, oh,
yeah.
What happens is if you find yourself in those level 1, level 2 companies, as you start to personally mature, you start to become a leader. Now, it might not necessarily be a manager, as Stephen was saying, the difference between the two. You find yourself a leader in the company. And as you know, leaders create followers. So now you're educating other people on how to move up that ladder, if you will. So now you're transforming an organization. Now I've done this and I've seen it, and I became the follower of someone else who explained that exact same idea to me. I started following it, and now I'm seeing that I've gotten followers, and it's like, hey, this is how you move up that ladder. This is how you mature your organization. You start with yourself, and then it makes it easier to go back and say, okay, business, this is the value of design. This is the value of doing this X, Y, and Z feature. And communicating that in a way so that they have buy-in, and all of a sudden now you've got a army of little U's, and you're now changing. So that way, you know, you can start with that small project that Stephen said, and or the one that no one cares about. And hey, I've got success by showing, and then I can tell, and then going down that process. I have had a lot of sorry, I just had a complete mind. I've had a lot of success from that. So I would recommend anybody who's looking like, okay, how do I move to that next level? Take a look at Leah Bewley's work and figure out where you are on that chart, and then see the next steps. Now, is it a one-to-one roadmap? No, but it kind of gives you some guideposts as to what to hit.
Framework, right?
Yeah. And I think the other thing to add on to what Ella said is also, don't think about maturity as being one-dimensional. I mean, the model that we used had 12 different dimensions, right? Like, yes, it aggregates into a number, but again, sort of understanding the nuance of like, what are you good at and what are you not? I think that helps a lot. And the other thing that I'll actually do, and especially depends on sort of the complexity of your company, is in some cases, I'll actually almost do like a 9-box of the maturity of all the different teams. Because I've also found that like most companies, especially bigger and more matrix ones, aren't one problem, they're 20. So like, let's look at the 20 different teams and sort of do the 9-box of like low maturity to high maturity, low engagement to high engagement. And like, let's actually do like that scatter shot of saying, okay, look, you know, who's high maturity, high engagement, low maturity, low engagement, you know, high engagement, low maturity, because then we can start to actually sort of battle plan, how do we engage and change that sort of thing? Because again, rarely is it, oh, I need to go talk to one person and then the whole company is different.
Right. So that's great. And I'll just add this and then maybe we can go into that next one. Ellis, thank you for that. But coming from my position, for those that might be in the lower tier on how you could make that actionable, the one thing that's coming to mind is being able to do that yourself, map the other teams, and then understand who you might be able to go into that team and work with that could be a lateral or maybe even above, and then recruit that way. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's like work with the people who want to work with you. And I think also whenever you do that, like I'm such a big believer in like conversations, not presentations. Like just go talk to them and say, look, I feel like this isn't working. I feel like we could be doing better here. I feel like, you know, these are some things that we can change, because I think also the other thing you're going to find is that change is much harder to defeat whenever there are multiple people working together. Like whenever it's just one person trying to affect change, it is very easy to disenfranchise and minimize an individual. It is much, much harder to do it whenever, again, there are multiple groups or multiple people. Wonderful. Gentlemen, thank you.
Sure thing. Weena, you the next question. I also love everybody who has like the super scenic backdrops. I feel like, yeah, I mean, Weena, you sort of look like you're in witness protection in the Alps, but like, yeah, no, it's great.
Hello? Oh, okay. So now you hear me clearly? Okay, yes. Cool. Just a quick introduction. So I'm actually an industrial designer, but now I'm a product UX designer based in Germany. Actually I'm pretty happy to found these amazing people design list. My question would be, you know, because from my now I'm looking for a UX designer job. Let's say I'm pretty interested in the game industry. And then from my background, I'm an industrial designer, product designer, and UX designer. You know, it's kind of also a mixture of art and design gone through with artists, cross-functional design vision. However, now when it comes to the game industry, I had tried to ask a lot of UX designer, do they know any insight of where game is done, what is game industry, people looking for a UX designer, or what kind of portfolio do they need? And some of my problem is that I can say I'm pretty proficiency in Illustrator and Photoshop, drawing cars, drawing shoes, working for Adidas and AMG before. However, now it came, you know, the Corona, and then I was being laid off. So now I wanted to search for another new possibilities also for myself, being a keen of art and design. That's why I came to that, like, well, why not I try out the game industry, because I know I can draw very well. But then there come the question, like, what do they looking in the game industry? Yeah, that was my question. How does that work? Because I don't have a portfolio that could, you know, not a typical portfolio that I have some UI design, I have different stuff. So that's why I'm just wondering, like, how can I break through this kind of situations?
Right. I mean, so I think there are a few things I would say. I think one is, for me, like this exact problem is why I've always tried to talk about my career in my ability to be creative, my ability to have ideas, my ability to lead people, because I've worked in so many, I've worked in print, I've worked in movies, I've worked in animation, I've worked in branding, I've worked in advertising, I've worked in digital, I've worked, like I code, like, and so again, like a lot of recruiters are very much like, I have a box this big. If you don't fit in that box, I don't know what the hell to do with you. So again, I think, right. So yeah, like I said, this is why, yeah, this is always like turns into therapy real quick. But I think that's the thing, right? Is that so I think there's a couple things that you probably are gonna need to be able to do. I think one is that, you know, for me, you are going to need to be able to show people that you have some ability, some insight, because I do think one of the legitimate questions that you will get is, if you've gone from product design to UI design and now you want to go into game design, how do I know that this is the career you want to stick with, right? And again, I think we all sort of go through that exploration period, but I think the ability to say, even if I design my own game, even if I, again, have gone in and sort of learned some of the technologies or done something, because I think that's what you want to give people to do, is if you can show, I know how to work with big brands, I know how to solve problems, I know how to do these sort of things. What I'm going to need is just the opportunity to be able to do this, but I can bring all these kind of like, I can bring this energy and I can bring this experience into this space. But I think part of that is going to be, how do you sell yourself on your site or to people? You know, I'm more than happy, because I know I work with teams at like Blizzard or EA, Guerrilla Games, who's based in Berlin. Again, you know, I do work with them. So again, I think that ability to reach out to people to be able to get advice or to do things like that. But I think that's going to be the thing, is like, right, is how do you say, look, I'm about creativity, I'm about, and then there is something that will show, here's the insight or potential that I am good at game design. Because if you're asking them to go 100% on faith, either you're probably going to end up with a job you don't want, or again, it's going to be too big of a leap for too many other people to make. And that's why I said, I've hired tons of people who worked at small companies, had very little experience, but they showed me something that I could say, you know what, I can see it in there. Maybe it's not in the execution. Maybe they haven't worked on a AAA game. Maybe they haven't done whatever that is, but there's something there that I want to invest in. So again, I think if you can do that, then that should hopefully get you to that good place. But I think, know that most of the recruiting is going to be broken. Know that they're going to, and again, who you're sort of competing against. But I think, like I said, if you can do that, and sort of like, again, the advice I gave to Zoe, I'd also just start like writing people, like reaching out and just saying, hey, look, you know, this is where I'm at. These are the things I want to do. I'm almost, since I've actually, like, I personally review all the mentors, I know there's at least 1 or 2 game designers who are in there. And so again, I think, you know, that ability to reach out to them and ask those sort of questions, because again, I think that conversation may lead to a job or a connection or something like that. But I think if you do that, that should hopefully, you know, be able to get you someplace where you can be able to find that.
Okay. Sounds cool. I think I will connect you privately if that's fine for you.
You can anybody can always feel free to reach out to me. I'll get back to you as quick as I can.
Okay, thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Let's move.
Thank you, Weena.
I mean, because of time it's remaining, so I think I should give sometime to other people, and we could have more conversation with you.
Yeah. I'm also happy to go. I can go a little bit over too if we want to, just if there are more questions.
May I have the next question, please?
Yeah. So guys, we've got 8 more minutes. I think Steve is still okay to go a little bit overrun. So let's just do 3 more final questions, okay?
Can I have the next one?
Carry on.
Go for it. Go for it. Sherry, go for it.
I was going to say, just for the fact you planted the flag like that, you definitely need the next question.
Okay, so I'm a UI UX designer, but I had some experience, but I actually just graduated. But as I'm getting into the industry more, I'm wondering whether you have some suggestions on how to get more like public mention or exposure of your work. Yeah.
My advice would be don't ever think about things like that.
Okay.
And again, I don't say that to try to like be mean or anything like that. It's just, for me, I really sort of believe that like if you go into something to try to get mentioned or to try to get popular or to try to do whatever it is, you most of the time you don't, right? I think if you concentrate on really sort of like 2 things, and I think it's like 1, just concentrate on doing the best work you can, right? I mean, really, like, just again, on everything you do, it's always an opportunity to get noticed and to break out. And then I think 2, to really work on understanding your voice, who you are, what makes you different, what is your opinion, how are you not like everybody else? I think if you do those 2 things, then the follows, then the popularity, then all that stuff come, right? Because again, I spent like 38 years of my life being way too caught up in how do I get popular and what do I, like, that's why I started like doing public speaking, because I got laid off and I'm like, well, important people speak. No, that was the wrong reason to do it. That's why I was so bad at it for so long. It was only whenever I sort of like, and I think that's literally why I have the crazy 1 tattoo. That's why I started this whole thing, was because I got so caught up in like trying to be popular, trying to be who I thought people wanted me to be, that I kept missing who I was. And at the moment, whenever I started to be myself, the moment whenever I started to really use my voice, my career exploded, the following popped up. Like, there was a lot of those sort of things, but I think that's the thing is like, because in most of the case, if you're doing it just to sort of get noticed, you tend to say very generic things. You tend to do a lot of those things that aren't going to kind of get you noticed. And so again, I think that for me would be the best advice, was if you really concentrate on those and then put those opinions, put that work, put those things out there. If it is authentic, if it is real, if there is like talent and thought behind it, you will always find an audience, right? Because there always will be people that connect with that. It's the point when you try to like fake the funk. Those are the people where it's like, they have a YouTube channel and it's been up there for 5 years and they have 200 followers, right? Because again, they're just trying to be what somebody else wants them to be. I always will tell people, like, think of your favorite artist, your favorite musician, your favorite director, like whoever that is. They did not become successful by being like everybody else, right? So I think if you really focus on that, that'll be the thing. Because that's why I said, I think we all just get too hung up on like how many connections we have on LinkedIn or how many followers we have or how many. I don't give a shit about how many connections I have on LinkedIn, because they don't mean anything. Like, until we have a conversation, until there's a real connection, until I can like get somebody to do something, like it's fine and it's a metric that you can feel good about, but what does it really do? So that's why I would say is for me, I think, really focus on those things. And because that's what I said is I think 1, you're gonna have a vastly more successful career. It's gonna save you a ton of frustration, but then those sort of things will also come.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess it's just sad to be an international student in the States. You need to get your visa. So like public mention, it's a required thing.
Well, and but that's what I'm saying though, but again, like there are a lot of people whose visas I sponsor. There's a lot of people who do that because again, they've sort of shown their voice or they've shown their value or because I think that's that part is if you can generate the demand to say, oh my God, like Sherry does this amazing work or she's got these amazing opinions or she's doing those sort of things, right? The visa offers become really, I mean, that's what I said. And I don't need one, but in my experience in talking to people, it will become a bit easier because you'll have more people that will do it. You have more opportunities. You have those sort of things. I think also just don't get too hung up on working in the US too. Like, again, I know that we tend to be a little bit further ahead, but again, I think there are so many people in so many local communities that are doing such amazing work because there is so much bullshit in Silicon Valley and New York and these other places. Because I think like again, I came back to New York. I've been here for 15 years. I'm actively trying to leave in the next year or two because I'm just sort of done. And like I said, I know that it's like we've all watched enough movies and it's so sort of romantic, but that's why I said, I think for me, a lot of the innovation is actually happening and going to be happening much more outside of the US. So that's what I said, is I think also maybe don't sort of like, you know, try to get to something that also maybe might be around where you are already.
Right.
Sounds good.
Sorry, I'll jump in real quick. I agree. I think a lot of art designers and leaders are looking to leave the US soon. Europe is booming, and unfortunately the diversity is really, really rough here than it was maybe 2-3 years ago, I'd say. So that's definitely making an impact, at least from my end.
Yeah, because I've seen massive exoduses out of Google and Apple of people who are going. Like again, I see them going to Sydney and going to Australia. I see them going to Asia. I see them going into Berlin. I see them going in. London's a little maybe too expensive. I think you're starting to see Paris get their act together. They're putting big incubators together. You're seeing, you know, a lot of those sort of things where there are other places that are really starting to do that. But I think that's the problem is like, if you just look at the cost of living of like, again, I will never go to San Francisco because it is 40% more expensive than New York. That is bonkers. But again, I think that ability to be able to do those sort of things, like, and that's the thing is like, people don't want the 2-hour commute. They don't want to rent the rest of their life. They don't want, you know, to be able to have that sort of experience when in many cases they can have that sort of an impact other places.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's really helpful to be like open-minded and just follow the passion.
Yeah. And that's what I said. I think just that's the biggest thing is I think if you just really concentrate on you and your work and be able to like concentrate on that work, concentrate on your voice, then that's why I said that is the thing. Every company until the end of time is going to need that. They need creativity. They need originality. They need leadership. Like those are things that will never go out of style. And like I said, is I think if you can invest in those, the most successful people I know, that's what they really do.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you so much.
Sure thing.
Hi, Steven.
Hey.
Hey. I will be very, very short because I know there is not much time. So what if you were a 2 years experienced designer with 10 years of being a professional sports player? How would you balance these two, not personalities, but experience in your portfolio? I mean, in my next level, I don't want to be hired because I was a professional volleyball player. I want to be hired because I'm a good designer. But still, the way I noticed that I approached the design job, it's not so far from the way I used to approach the game.
Oh, 100%. No, I think that's one of the biggest things I study and coach is they're actually around sports psychology. And so I would say, like, for me, that ability to lean into that story to say, because look, you know, I would look at that and say, you know, there's at least something interesting there because, you know, again, you are somebody who knows how to perform at a really high level. You know how to be a part of a team, you know. So again, I think there's a lot of those skills that translate. And so for me, and again, I know not enough people think like this. Like, I'm always looking for how do people think? What experience do they have? How do they come over? And maybe it's from another industry. Like, you know, I always had a professor who would tell me, like, I can tell you how to hold a pencil. I can't tell you how to think. And so for me, I think that to talk about having that sort of success, being able to participate at the highest level, being able to do teamwork and creativity and actually say, hey, look, that's how these skills have translated. And that, you know, these are the ways that it's sort of coming to life in my work. Then I think that would sort of give you the ability to be able to talk about more of those things. But to me, any of those sort of things that make you unique, that make you stand out, that give you those experience, those are always the things I say to lean into because they're going to make you stand out from everybody else. Like, I mean, it's sort of sad to me because like whenever I do all the portfolio reviews and feedback, like there's literally a form letter that I start with that is like all the things that I see over and over again that are always wrong. And I just go and I start copying and pasting those in and then just start to like customize them because so many people are just generic. So many people, it's like they use so many words and don't say anything, right? So again, I think that ability to like lean into that, to say, look, you know, I did this sort of thing and you're right. I don't think they're going to, unless it's a volleyball company, I don't know that they're going to hire you because you're a professional volleyball player. But for me, it'd be really interesting to have somebody with that perspective, with that experience, who understands teamwork and those sort of things on that level. I think those will all be huge pluses to be a part of a team.
So I don't need to hide that part on my portfolio.
No, never hide who you are, right? Never. Like again, people get weird about me talking about getting laid off or doing that sort of stuff. Like, now, because that's the thing, is like, you shouldn't want somebody who's going to hire you for you being somebody else and not yourself.
No, never.
Yeah. So I started to add in here, so many do not know this, but I was actually in the national team in Singapore for rollerblading for like the past 5 years. And as someone who represents the nation in the sport, I think, coming into design, it has helped me in a lot of ways in sort of like pitching yourself to like recruiters or the people that are hiring in the first place, because to be a sportsman, I think at the core is a lot of practice, a lot of hard work. And I think that itself is an attribute, right? That itself is an attribute that, I personally admire a lot because I've been there. And I think that you have been there longer than I am, 10 years. And those are things that you can translate, right? Those are like soft skills. And I think to Stephen's point is that, if you're still passionate about sports, apply for a sports brand that you're really passionate about. I'm just thinking about Nike. I'm not sure why, but I'm just thinking that, if you apply for a really great company that you really like, a sports brand that truly care about athletes, right? That could truly care about great athletes, right? I think they would respect your craft and they would really admire the kind of background that you come from, and they would love your perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think mine was a similar thing. So growing up for me, and it was not the cool sport to be in, but like I was on the United States Junior Olympic archery team. Like I was the second alternate to go to one of the Olympics. Like again, you do not get dates and girls when you're in high school and you shoot archery, right? Like that is not. But I think, that ability, that story about teamwork and things like that, it got me into college. It got me early on in my career, the ability to talk about what I learned and how could I take that sort of process and apply it to my creativity. I think it's just, again, you're going to need to help them see how it translates. So don't expect them to be able to do it. But I think if you can say teamwork and like all those sort of things, and this is how it translates, then again, I think it turns into a really powerful story.
Yeah, well, then I will leave you the space to other guys. Since there was the lockdown in Italy for the COVID, I restarted practicing at home while, I want to have a break. I'm not taking a coffee with my colleagues. I'm picking up my ball and, start practicing for a few minutes. Then I become more creative as well. Mm-hmm. So,
no, and I think there's also a great insight there about how important it is to be bored. Like where again, I think just even building in those times, especially when you're remote, becomes super important.
Yeah. Thank you for the insights, Stephen.
Sure thing.
I had a similar question. Can I speak or?
Yeah. Go for it. Yeah, you were the last question.
Yeah, I had a similar question about transitioning from a technical background to UX, and even though I projected most of my leadership skills, or in my previous company, I actually led the UX team and I fought for a seat at the table. And even though I'm projecting all those, but the reality is very different. So either they look for, like most of the companies I've seen is like are in silos, like either research team, design team, and even though they look for experts in each field. So since I came from a different technical field, not really UI design, and people are expecting, if you say, I'm very good at thinking and expressing myself, but they're kind of expecting those UI skills, and I'm being passed. I feel like the reality is very different from what we hope for. So any suggestions?
100%. And I think sort of the advice I gave before, I think there's always that balance of if you're coming from another discipline or another industry, I think you're going to always need to show something that I can believe in, some sort of design, because if not, then I'm betting 100% on faith. And for me, rarely can I burn ahead just with that sort of hope, especially if we're getting into leadership and things like that. So I think one is, there's always going to be that reality. You're going to need some sort of worker to be able to show that. But the other thing I will say to your point is that, for me, it's also realizing we are dealing with a system that is fundamentally broken. Most HR teams have no idea how to hire creative people. Most HR teams have no idea what good looks like. They have a bunch of like qualifications or buzzwords, and they're scanning resumes looking for that. So again, I think, this is one of those things too, where for me, it really is also about like, how do you start reaching out to people? How do you start, because if I can basically jump the line of knowing that most of the time my resume is going to get cut and probably rejected, you know, because whenever it hits that first wave who doesn't really know what they're doing, if I can start to talk to leaders, start to talk to companies, start to make connections, start to do those sort of things with the people that are the hiring managers, because then we can have a conversation about leadership. Then we can have a conversation about what that is, about why I want to work there, about doing those sort of things. Usually that's going to lead to better outcomes, because that's what I said is it's like, look, I still, after I left a hotel company, every recruiter wanted to talk to me about hotel companies. Now recruiters only seem to ever want to talk to me about going back to a bank. I don't want to go back, but apparently they can't seem to understand that like skills translate across industries or across disciplines, that like apparently if you do this one thing, that's the only thing you can do. But that's why I think if there's some way, like I said, of sort of, you know, taking up that fight or looking at how are you telling that story or doing those sort of things, because to me, I really believe that like, you know, it is going to be an extremely coveted position to have somebody who genuinely understands design and engineering. As those two keep moving closer, as again, you can see the road where, you know, again, prototypes are going to start to deteriorate. They're going to start to get into more actual code. There's much more dependency on those teams being together. Like there's so many things there that I think, you know, really are, you know, be able to go in and to be able to be a part of that. And that's why I said, like, look, not every recruiter is bad. Not every system is broken. But, you know, again, most companies, and especially right now, I think the thing that we're going to see is, for me, the recruiters and the people who did really get it were often external. And I think as budgets are going to be cut, as companies are going to shrink, the problem is more of that's probably going to come in-house. And I think that's why, for me, I feel like, you know, we're definitely, you know, in that position to be able to sort of struggle with some of those things. But that's why I said also for me, just that ability to get feedback on, okay, look, you know, if you're not going to hire me, why not? Because I think that's the other broken part, is that most of the time you either get a rejection letter or you get silence.
Yeah.
How the hell, and again, I think that was what Felix and James did that was so brilliant, was to build the mentors into ADP, was because then we could start to create some feedback loop to help make people better. But I think that ability to be able to do those things hopefully would be able to either let you know what you need to improve or let you be able to tell your story in a way, like I said, that isn't just sort of like, you know, I hope I get the right combination of keywords.
The sad part is we don't get feedback, one thing. And even if we approach to get feedback, we don't get any responses. That's another thing. And being new to this community, you know, trying to build that network, if we need someone to give that responses, right? And feedback.
And to me, I think that's why, for me, I think the best leaders right now have realized that like outreach is the new recruiting. That again, and I think, you know, that ability to be like, I want to go work for somebody who wants me to be there. I want to go work for somebody who I have a connection to, or I want to hire somebody who has reached out and is passionate about what it is that I want to do. Like those sort of things, I think make a really big difference. But I think also like this is an industry where it's like Goldilocks and the Three Bears. Because like somehow, like for me, I went from having not enough experience to way too much, and I was never just right. Right? Like, I don't know how that happened, but like the responses I get right now, it's like, oh, we think you've got too much experience. It's like, how the hell is that a thing? Like, but so again, I think there's also those sort of things where it's just, you know, again, knowing that it often, in many cases, I think, especially if you have a unique skill set, that's why for me, actually, in the last 3 jobs I've got, came out of me having connections with people and conversations. Like the job I'm in right now, I did not go looking for. It was a combination with Clark, the CEO, and him just saying, hey, what do you think the industry needs? And we made a position because it was like, look, you've got this weird skill set that doesn't seem to fit cleanly anywhere. So again, I think that ability to even have that opportunity to say, okay, look, we've got a spot where we really could use you, may also be the thing that to be able to think about.
Yeah. All right, guys. So we, thanks, Steve, for that thoughtful question, for that thoughtful answer, right? And so we have reached to the final question, and that has just been answered. And we really appreciate all of you guys for tuning in here. And before we end this call, I just want to say, you know, a huge shout out to Stephen, you know, for being so supportive of the entire community. You know, he has been behind the scenes, you know, helping us vet through the mentors. You know, let's give him a round of applause, Stephen. Thank you for doing the first ever coffee hours. You know, a really, really respectable leader in the industry for all of us here. And I think shout out to all the mentors that has attended this call as well. If you're here, you know, appreciate the work that you're doing for every single designer in the world. You know, and lastly, to every single designer here in this room today, and of course, to your friends that you might be sharing the, you know, this message to, you know, just tell your friends or yourself that, you know, during this period is kind of crazy, but you know, this is where we all thrive, and this is where we all come together to support one another. sometimes it's hard to be alone in situations. But I think that, building this community at the heart is a community that we can all, belong somewhere, right? Where all designers can come here, be themselves, be the best version of themselves, and, just be it finding a job or be it finding a friend or, just being a better designer. I think this community is something bigger than design by itself. So I really appreciate all of you for tuning in today. The next episode, the next coffee hours will be 2 weeks later. So it will be done every 2 weeks and it will be a different guest mentor. So all this, every 2 weeks, it will change a mentor and it'll be more exciting, different formats and stuff like that. And we really appreciate all of you for tuning in today. So yeah, feel free to share the notes around and, share the screenshots. And if you ever share on LinkedIn, feel free to tag ADP List. We'll come in and we'll share that content on your behalf as well. So I wish everyone a really good day ahead. And, thank you all for tuning in today. Bye-bye.
See you guys.
Bye. Bye.